I've actually lost
Sorry.
files like when I've recorded. No, it's okay. I had this really embarrassing moment. I was doing media training for a Web3 client, and I wanted to record an interview and then but I lost the video like for the interview that I did that was like 30 minutes.
No.
Yeah, it was unfortunate, but I ended up like, you know, I had all my notes and everything on how they could improve their presence, but yeah, that was funny.
That was from recording to the cloud?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
It was something happened in like I didn't save or I like my Apple device just uploaded it to the cloud and then like, it was corrupt, so I couldn't get it back. And then oh no, the
Oh,
audio was gone. It was like no, I
oh,
was not happy.
no, bad. Yeah, we don't like that.
Yeah, no good, no good.
So I'm recording to my computer. Hi, Saul. Nice
Hi
to
there, how are you
meet
doing?
you.
Nice to see you.
Yeah, we're good. We're just sort of chatting, and get waiting for people to join, obviously. And our first listeners here, David. Hi.
Hello, David.
And I've started recording right away just to have that be in motion.
Cool.
And I'm also going to send the mentor form, ACJR Mentor program. But yeah, I'm genuinely excited to hear your guys' intros to kick us off because I don't know you that well. I know Wahid a little bit because we work together. And yeah, but you recently made the switch, so I'm curious to hear about that. Just genuinely here for this webinar. This is all for me, actually.
Huh. Well,
Plot twist.
we actually Tom from CoinDesk just moved across to Angle 42. So it's quite current seeing how he's adapting, and it was interesting hearing his thought process as he was doing it.
Oh, that's cool. That's yeah,
Interesting.
he's fresh.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's it's definitely, as we mentioned before, it's definitely like a very clear funnel or like path, like a natural path, I feel like, whether it's to marketing or PR. But the PR, I guess the reason that we wanted to talk about this today is because the PR funnel is, or that transition from like working on the editorial side to working in PR, it makes a lot of sense, but I think personally, I think some people are a little like hesitant or maybe scared of it because it's like the other side. It's not the
Yeah.
same as like marketing in general, but it's like, the other symbiotic part of media is PR. Like I always, as a person who's worked across both, I'm always like, we need the PR people. We don't need to be mean to the PR people. We don't need to resent them. We need them. But it's like for some reason so controversial.
Yeah, I think
It's
there's
like
like this.
the
Oh, go
dark
ahead.
side. Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry. Please go on.
No, I was just going to say exactly to what you were saying that it's kind of considered the dark side, or there's this prohibition and you can't go back. And if you become a PR person, that's it. Like you've signed the contract now, you're out of the journalism circuit. But I think that's changing quite a bit. I know a lot of even on the opposite, great communications professionals who actually just said, you know what, I want to be a journalist, and they, now work at Bloomberg and other agencies. So you can definitely always go back. It's kind of a myth.
That's a really good point. Yeah. Somebody commented on my LinkedIn post about this, like, I want to see a webinar the other way. And I was like, yeah, good point. We can do that too. We can do that.
For sure. Yeah, that would be great actually.
Um, yeah, I feel like there's sort of like a stigma or something. And I have worked across both sides, and I am currently working on both sides, which is a separate sort of weird situation. But oh, hey, I see some familiar faces or names. But yeah, okay, so it's 2 minutes after the hour. We are recording, FYI. I want to wait a couple minutes more. Just give people a chance to join. But we do only have an hour, so I'm sensitive to that. Like, not taking up everyone's time. I guess what I'll do is I'll get the housekeeping stuff out of the way. So I'm Olivia. Thank you all for joining, and a special thank you to the panelists for making this happen. Today we're talking about, the transition or the path from working on the editorial side, media side, to PR in crypto specifically, because we're in crypto. And I'll just do a quick intro of myself. I'm currently a member of the ACJR board, and I am also currently, as I said, working on both the media and PR side. I'm an editor at the Defiant with Cami Russo, and I am also head of media strategy at a relatively new boutique PR agency called Conquista PR. And today, I want to basically let the panelists introduce themselves. They'll do a better job. But the couple of housekeeping things are, number one, questions are very welcome. So please just write them in the chat at any time. We'll try to get to everyone's questions. And thank you to people who sent questions ahead of time. The other thing is the ACJR has a mentor program, which is very exciting. And I put the sign up form for that program in the chat, and I'm going to pin it. But basically, it's that form is for both people looking to mentor other people in the industry. So this is for crypto journalists and researchers, hence our name, and also be a mentee. So the form is for both, and there is a part of the form specifically for journalists and editors looking to move into PR. If that's like the skill that you want to work on or the area you want to kind of hone in on, we will match you with a relevant mentor. So have a look at that, and I'll remind everyone at the end. So it is now 10:05, depending on where you are in the world. Just gave away where I am. And we're just going to kick it off with the wonderful panelists introducing themselves. And I'd love for you guys to introduce yourselves like with the sort of perspective of you making your story, making the switch, and maybe get right into the motivations for that. Maybe Ashley, you could kick it off.
Sure. Okay. My name's Ashley. I was a journalist for 10 years in local breaking news in Toronto. Started as an assignment editor, was pretty much an assignment editor my whole career, and spent a little bit of time at BNN Bloomberg, which is the Bloomberg of Canada. And then also I was a manager at Global Toronto. So I assigned all the reporters and the cameras and managed the live truck department. I'll kind of speed run through my story because I think the transition to PR is orthogonal to the transition to building out my own company. But basically it was, during COVID, I was one of the many people that had a pandemic epiphany. Kind of everybody was going through this big transition phase, wanting to reinvent themselves. And I was walking down the street one day and I had a PR person leave a voicemail. It was a pitch. They actually called that, and left a pitch on my phone. And, I was like many of you getting hundreds, dozens of pitches a day and like getting back to maybe one, if at all. And so I called the person back saying, "Hey, thank you so much for calling. I'm just responding to," and she said, "Wow, I sent I left that voicemail weeks ago." So I was just like I was exhausted, and there was a lot going on. There was COVID, early mornings, late nights, and I kind of just vented to her. I was like, "I'm sorry." Like I was almost like cathartic to get a lot of stuff off my chest. And she's like, "Would you ever be interested in coming over to PR? Like if you're sort of curious or wanting to know what it's like." And I was really nervous. Like I didn't want people, especially in my industry, figuring out that I was sniffing around or like curious about PR. So I said, okay, well, I'll have a conversation with your boss, but it has to be very confidential. Like I don't want this getting back to anyone. And so I said we set up a call, and it was a small, similar Olivia, like a small boutique PR firm, and they specialized in crisis communications. And I was like, oh, that sounds really interesting. Like I could see like maybe that being something I would want to try out or learn about. And so eventually I went over there, and that was my first like six-figure salary. And like many of you, I kind of had the classic imposter syndrome of, okay, am I going to be a good fit? Am I going to be good enough? Are my skills good enough? And eventually I brought on my first client, which was a crypto client. I had a friend that was working as the CFO at a company called Ether Capital at the time. They were essentially a public company and a net accumulator of ETH. It sounds familiar. Anyways, they were like the first DAT. And so I eventually went over there as their director of comms. So that was kind of like an in-house move I made. And immediately got really excited about crypto, loved the disruptive tech aspect, loved the financial aspect coming from, business journalism. And the company restructured, they converted to an ETF, and I was laid off. And then I had what am I going to do? I'm in the States now. I'm living in the States. And so I just kind of started looking for work everywhere. And fortunately, I had enough connections built up. So, I'd write a blog post for Eigenlayer and get paid a little bit here. Or, I remember EtherFi reached out to me, and they were like, hey, we really liked what you did with ETHCap. Can you want to come help us? Like, we need a Discord moderator. And I was like, okay. And, just trying to do whatever I could. But eventually that became like drinking from a fire hose. And then, PR, like people wanted me to help them out. And so that's when I kind of said, okay, I think I'm going to just slap together an LLC and call it, and, bring on clients. So that's kind of my story, and I'm sorry for rambling. So I'll hand it off to the next person.
Thank you so much. Yeah, awesome. Saul, maybe you can go ahead.
Sure. So I was a journalist for a long time at different agencies, started in a local newspaper, Bloomberg, Dow Jones, and then I spent most of my career at Reuters. I spent a lot of it in Latin America, but I did cover stories all around the world. So I was a war correspondent. I was based in DC doing following the Secretary of State around the world, etc. And I became for Reuters the head of operations for the Americas. So it was a big media executive job. I spent in the budget $80 million a year on the 700 journalists across the hemisphere. And that became less exciting than being on the front lines telling the story. So I was starting to think I want to do something different. And my Latin American experience had got me curious about crypto. So I didn't move from journalism to PR, I moved from journalism to crypto. I was constantly asking the journalists who supposedly took orders from me to pay attention to Bitcoin. I'd lived in Venezuela. I was having to pay people dealing with hyperinflation in Argentina, and realized there's an alternative to fiat currencies. So I couldn't get the journalists very interested, and the business side wouldn't take me seriously at that time when I was saying that we need to treat crypto as its own asset class. So it became for me a case of, well, I have to walk the walk here. So I started going to crypto conferences, getting to know people, fell down the rabbit hole, as we all say. And then my story becomes a bit like Ashley's. I didn't know what to do, but the space kind of knew what I could offer. It was like, oh, a media guy who's actually interested in us. Let's tell him our stories. Let's get him to tell those stories to the media. And it was great because initially I had all sorts of consulting jobs that I basically got paid to learn about crypto. That's how I always felt. I was being paid while I was just getting my hands dirtier and dirtier. And it became obvious relatively quickly that what I could offer was getting startups into the media, getting the media to cover them, because I was able to tell the story in a way that they themselves, as founders, as technologists, probably weren't telling. And I think I also brought a certain credibility, because the space still suffers from it, but certainly back then there's a lot of skepticism about the scams and everything. But if I was representing a company, it immediately was like, well, this former Reuters guy wouldn't be, shilling like this. That helped. And then what I did was I formalized it, made Angle 42. Been running this for years now. We have a small team, including former journalists. And, I'm sure when we get into it, I can explain as well some of their experiences moving to the PR side.
Thank you so much. It's fantastic. So yeah, really interesting. Both of you guys have that traditional journalism deeply moving and then moving into crypto and kind of. So Wahid, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here, Olivia. It's Wahid. I'm not sure. I think I've seen a lot of faces, familiar faces here. And I guess most of you know me from my reporting at crypto outlets, from tier 3, tier 4 outlets to tier 1 outlets like Cointelegraph, Benzinga, and a few others. Actually, crypto for me was like a lifeline. I'm not sure how many of you know this, but I'm from Afghanistan, and here the actual, let's say, access to financial services like banks and stuff like that is very limited. So crypto was like a lifeline for me. It was an excellent way for me to get funds and money here and get them turn them into cash here. It was quite a great experience for me going into reporting, crypto reporting, and getting paid in crypto. And then after a few years, I realized that I am very interested in more than just reporting, trying to be included within company operations, how things really move on in the back, and how companies really make decisions, how everything needs to be decided internally. It was kind of something I've been trying to get into for a couple of years, and tried even helping with some marketing and BD teams at some of the companies I've previously worked in. I'm sure we've had this kind of conversation with Olivia at crypto.news. And unfortunately, the media side didn't work out really well for me to get into marketing. And then I tried looking out for PR agencies and companies, in-house agencies, anything. And thankfully, Input Communications finally accepted me, a bit with cautious, but still, they accepted me as an junior or intern PR manager. And soon I changed from part-time to full-time, and I'm really lucky to be here because I'm finally getting my hands into like everything companies decide, how everything moves behind the scenes, making decisions for what really needs to be done. And most importantly, I think my crypto reporting experience here is helping me like deciding what should be shared and what not should be shared. So I think it's been quite a journey for me, and thank you so much.
Amazing, thank you. Yeah, maybe we can dig into that thing that you said at the end about like kind of the obvious question, like how your media experience applies. So you've very recently made this switch. Congratulations also on the input role. And I think like the bigger picture, as we kind of touched on at the beginning, is that like we work in crypto. If you've worked on the media side, you know like the job market's changing. There are arguably fewer jobs, it feels like, in editorial, in media. And a lot of people are looking to maybe stay in the industry, but in some other role. So keeping that in mind, that a lot of, in terms of like motivations for different people, this might be, again, like a a switch people are looking to make, but they're maybe scared to get started, or there's a stigma around it, or they don't want to be perceived as kind of ruining their reputation. So maybe we could jump into the question of like, what are the skills that are shared? And not just the skills, the mindset, like what mindset had to shift, and what do you feel comes across from media to PR?
Well, I guess the most important thing we can bring from media to PR is how internally news desks and newsrooms work, and when we know that how actually how actually stories are made and how decisions are made internally at newsrooms, we have a better grasp of what to send to the reporters and editors and how to shape the narrative for our clients and the companies from different sectors. We've got, like, for example, DeFi, and everyone is talking about revolutionary tech and everyone is about, like, they have the next generation. But what really matters is, like, what do you have to show? Like, what is, like, the real data? And me personally, as you know, I've been mostly into DeFi and markets, and I love to play with numbers. I think bringing numbers into the game is kind of like a big win for us.
Yeah, I just want to maybe riff off that a little bit. I think supplying like original data to back up any story is obviously very important, as everyone here knows. A lot of times, the client that you work with will have, you know, a new product or an announcement coming out, and they don't quite understand. They will say, this is great. We have to get, you know, the New York Times to cover this, and you're looking at this thinking, okay, well, there's not really a news story here, and the challenge is, you know, and they pay you as the expert to tell them that. So that's where a journalist's skills are invaluable, right? You're amazing storytellers. You understand that, okay, every story needs a sense. There has to be a sense of conflict, a sense of urgency, characters, context, what's at stake here, and have a broader impact and not just be, you know, it sort of differentiates it from just a marketing play. So I think that's where your skills are very much needed, and can kind of come in and transition over to say, okay, well, that on its own is not really a story, but, you know, hey, how about we can sort of use you as an example in a broader piece, and maybe that is the story. So I think that is something that a lot of sometimes comms people understand it, but it could take time for them to understand it. But you just naturally have that as journalists. And same with the writing aspect too. You know, corporate jargon is everywhere, and there is always going to be a little bit of pomp and circumstance to corporate communications and PR. You kind of have to sort of straddle that line a little bit. And that is a bit of an adjustment and a learning curve. It was for me. Like, I'm very much, you know, you know, when I went in, I felt kind of like a bull in a china shop. Like, when in the PR landscape, I, you know, didn't understand that there's like certain rules you have to go by and just systems. But yeah, I think the more that you can provide those skills in PR, the more you'll be able to, you know, you will get sought after. Basically, a lot of people will want to work with you.
I agree about the skills that have been described, and they're hugely beneficial for the agency. So people should feel confident in making the shift, that they're bringing that value. What's super important is to have a mindset that fits with PR, that is adjacent to but different to being in a newsroom. And I think this is why the label of the dark side has always been applied to PR, because in a newsroom, the goal is usually about objectivity and keeping your independence. And you're thinking ultimately of the benefit to the final audience, to the reader or the viewer. Whereas you have to understand that in PR, it's a B2B operation. You're working for a client, and you have to be comfortable with that. It's as if you're an agency, then you're basically fractionally working for different clients, but you're representing that client and their business. If you're in-house, you're obviously representing the one business. So your ultimate customer is a business that you're supporting. And not all journalists are comfortable with that because it's as if, you've sort of sold out for this capitalist organization. But what I think completely makes up for it, compensates for it in where we are, is that you're working in crypto and you're helping crypto businesses. I feel that in the aggregate, helping these different clients, I'm helping crypto overall. And I think the reason you feel good about that in this industry, as opposed to other industries, is that the industry has been misunderstood and the technology is not that well explained. So as the PR agency, you're really helping to tell this broad audience that's ever more curious about crypto what they sort of really need to understand behind the headlines and away from the bias. And I think that's a really rewarding thing, which kind of melds with what you were doing inside a newsroom anyway, because you're trying to transmit information in a way that's helpful for people. I've found that the journalists, and over the years, quite a few journalists have come to work for Angle 42. Some have been brilliant. They've been former crypto journalists who've done great in PR. They've been former Reuters journalists who've come across. Not all end up enjoying it because they don't make that switch necessarily. Everything that they're producing is still thinking of the final reader, let's say, and not the business that you're supposed to be representing.
Yeah, I think that was really well said. If do either of you other panelists want to add to that?
No, I think that's a great point. I think you kind of have to balance the client's needs with also, what's news value is there. And sometimes there isn't any if you're pitching a particular story. But it's also your job to try to find the news in that story as well. And again, like they're paying you to be a consultant. So to be honest, but you can't, you have to sometimes you have to get creative. You have to look for other angles. You understand that, like, if news comes across your desk in the newsroom and you see something, you'd be like, no, I'm not covering it, or I don't really see the news value in that, and you're moving on to the next. But at the end of the day, this client is paying you, and it is a contractual relationship, and you're going to have like good clients and bad clients, and that's going to be part of your growth trajectory too in PR. Like you're going to realize what types of clients you want to work with, and like which ones that you're like, okay, I'm not going to renew my contract with this person, or maybe their expectations are unrealistic. So that's kind of all part of learning and developing and kind of growing as a PR person as well.
Yeah, I can add to that as well to say that I think one of the really good things about doing this work and the fun stuff is that you have to be incredibly versatile because your work is varied. First of all, crypto's crazy, it's volatile, it's fast moving, and as a journalist, your beat might keep you relatively limited. I know that's not always the case, but certainly in an agency setting, you're working for various clients at a time, and therefore you feel like you know an awful lot about what's going on in the space. You have to keep up with it, and you're not going to be bored because from one day to the next, one of the clients' stories is part of a bigger trend. And I think that being versatile, enjoying the variety is a really good part of the job. Then, as Ashley alluded to, you work for clients who may or may not be good. What I think is a key thing to understand is because you work in the B2B space, you're working for that business, you have to fit in with the culture of the business. If you're at a media outlet, then there's a unifying culture that you are part of. It may not work for you, but if it works for you, great, you stay. Essentially, you're thinking of your ultimate audience, but your editor or editors. Imagine if you've got 10 different types of clients in different parts of the world with different expectations about how the media works. Culturally, I find it fascinating that, I might be dealing with a very technical founder who's maybe, done everything at Stanford and then flip to the other side, and it's someone who's much more entrepreneurial and go-getter, and they've been traveling all around the world, and you never know which city they're going to be in. And it brings with it, good and bad in each of those different cultures that you have to fit in with. And so the client management side of PR is just it's usually a complete unknown to anyone who's making the jump from journalism into PR.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely a new type of, or a different kind of skill set. Um, so we, so one question I wanted to ask you guys, is just like, because you have this experience, this journalism background in different ways, what would you like if you could say something to crypto media people at large from your perspective now? What do you want to communicate to crypto media people still in crypto media right now? Not about making the switch, but just about that empathy of being on both sides.
Um, that's a good question. I think sometimes, well, it's hard because, I being in the newsroom and getting so many pitches and you're like, this is absolute trash, or like this is not a good pitch. But then the person and they've actually pitched you really good stories. It's like sometimes you do have to pitch things that you're like, this is not maybe the client's like, no, I want you to pitch this. This is what I've hired you for. It's our announcement that's coming up, and you talk to them. You're like, okay, I'm not sure about the success rate here, but like you might have to do it anyways. And so I think just know that, like, hey, sometimes we do have to send you things. Like it might not be the best story. Get a little bit of empathy that way, perhaps. I'm not sure if any of the others have any thoughts. That's a good question.
Yeah, I guess that's a very good question. And from a PR perspective, I think to the media, I think both sides should understand that these both sides are kind of complementary of each other. They're not like separate, especially like right now that we've got new companies every single day, new medias are being shaped every single day. Some reporters are transitioning into like a single media like podcasts, or even, let's say, newsletters, email newsletters. So I think transitioning from, let's say, truth seeker to the story shaper is quite that both sides should understand well.
That's a great point. Yeah. I confess that when I was leading newsrooms, I used to always training people up and helping them in their careers, tell them to avoid the PR teams, right? Get your own sources and go as deep into the organization as you could. And in our case, in crypto, it's actually the opposite. I think the problem is that the startups themselves, they're not great at telling their own story. They don't necessarily understand the impact. Maybe they have a technological background, not necessarily a communications background. I think the PR agencies, the PR teams, definitely have a function that's very helpful for the media in this particular space, right? If I'm working and I'm doing PR for JP Morgan, that's probably quite different, right? You don't want to just be getting the spin from the PR guy. But in our case, I never feel like I'm spinning. I feel like I'm just trying to explain, I need to get educated by the client. I need to then try and educate the journalist. And in terms of empathy, if you were thinking of it from the other way around, I have huge respect for the crypto media. And I've said this often. I think it's one of the hardest beats you can have, right? And I had lots of beats myself in my career and helped lots of people in their beats. But what is it? It's 24/7. You never know from one day to the next what's going to happen. When you publish something, the response is incredibly shrill. You're really heavily scrutinized. You're never pleasing anybody. You're always displeasing everybody. And it's incredibly difficult to understand the technology side of it to even get the details, right? So I think the fact that we get decent, solid stories coming out at all is a miracle. The Definitely the media in the business, especially stretched as it is, I think does a terrific job, and hats off. And that's why if we can help, great, we can help.
I think just to add to what Saul said, like sometimes to for logistics, it's really just helpful to go, especially in pretty much all industries, but just to go through the PR person because we can easily schedule the interview. And sometimes if it gets like the CEOs are really snowed under, and I know, I used to be on the other side as well, where I just want to bypass the PR person because I'm like, you're gonna slow us down, but they can really help get you all of the facts you need for your story or like, what I need company info, but like quick digestible information. Can you share that with me? So that kind of, relationship really comes in handy as well. So
Yeah, for sure. I think I always try to remind my teams on the media side, on the editorial side, that like it's definitely a two-way street in the sense that like PR isn't all about just like shitty pitches in your inbox. It's or wherever. It's, reaching out. Like you, the journalists, need a contact. You should be in contact with with as many, industry players as possible. So, and the PR people, whether they're in-house or agency side, are your sort of like first contact for a company. And because they want to be in touch with you as a journalist, usually they're the easiest to get in touch with, usually, um, if they're responsive. So yeah, that's really important and appreciate that, you guys. Thanks for quoting my hair. Yeah, so I have another question, but I don't want to move on if there's something else you wanted to say, Saul.
Well, there's something on my head that I haven't said about making the switch. I realized just hearing the language that we're using on this, right? We say, oh, shitty pitches, the dark side. I've got too many things in my inbox. It's as if, you hear the negativity around PR and the person doing the PR. And so if you're going to make the shift, I tell you, you definitely have to have a thick skin. How many rejections do you get when you're doing journalism? You've got an editor, if you're a freelancer, you're pitching stories, but you're not expecting to be rejected 10 times a day. That's part of the course. Not because we're doing shitty pitches, but because for one reason or another on the other side, it's not the right time, it doesn't suit them, they're too busy, and yet you're on the hook for getting a result for your client. And so there's stress in getting that, of course, while you're being treated, not necessarily by everybody, but not in a particularly, collaborative or friendly way. And that's just, I think, the real politic of being in PR. Don't expect people to be treating you nicely, have a thick skin, and then enjoy the wins because they'll come.
that's a great point. I think definitely, and it's very similar to having a thick skin in journalism. Have getting rejected, getting doors shut in your face a lot. I think that makes journalists natural candidates to hop over to PR. I think one of the biggest learning curves or thing for me was, getting ignored by former colleagues or people that reported into me or people I assigned even. I would pitch them a story and then just crickets. You're like, wait a minute, I think, and then you start getting in your head and you're like, was it not a good story? But then meanwhile, you forget back in the newsroom, it's crazy because news is breaking and, maybe it is a good story, but it's just a terrible day to pitch or everybody's already out the door on their assignments. It's too late to flip them to something else. So, yeah, there is a lot to kind of experience in that transition. And, we can sit here and tell you all about it, but you kind of need to live it and experience it for yourself. And then, of course, just figuring like out if you want to go in-house agency, like that's a different path as well that we could probably expand on.
That was my next question. You read my mind. Yeah, I wanted to, since you guys are all agency side and we've been talking sort of implicitly about the agency experience, um, the question, I guess, maybe Ashley, you can just hop right into it. But it would be about what do you think people listening right now should know about making that choice between going in-house to be a PR rep versus agency side where you have many different clients?
I think I always say, like, when you're starting out, agency is a great first step because, as Saul mentioned, you get to work with a whole bunch of different clients. You get to put different skill sets to the test. You get to do different assignments. You might be working with a bank one day, writing blogs on cybersecurity, and then you flip to, helping a professor and this new promote this new research that came out that's really interesting. So that's kind of cool. And you can try different things too. Like, you might be working on a social media campaign, or you might be just doing like PR and pitching the media on another one. So that's kind of nice just to kind of get a sense of what it is you really want to be doing. And I also do think it's worthwhile to explore in-house roles as well, especially if there's an industry that you're really interested in. And that kind of happened to me when I went from working at an agency. I was just very excited about crypto, and I wanted to, be going to all of these developer conferences and interviewing developers. What are you building for my newsletter for this company I work for? And I think you just get to know in-house the company on a different, more intimate level, and just get your hands in different areas where sometimes at the agency level you know um, you have a primary scope and role with and contract with the company you're working for. Um, and that's something also, like, not to go on a tangent here, but like scope creep is very common in PR, and like clients that hire you, even though you have like a tight, knit marching orders or what you're working on, then they might be like, oh, by the way, can you run my social media accounts and can you do XYZ? So that's something that's like another subject. But yeah, I would say, like, starting, my advice would be to always start out in agency and then try in-house, or even like going on your own and see, like, okay, well, I kind of learned the ropes. Like, there is a learning curve no matter what. Like with comms, like, you might think, oh, I'm ready to just kind of flip the switch and jump right in, and you have all of the core skill sets, but there's a lot to communications and PR that are sort of hidden, like just in terms of client relationships, business development, putting together SOWs, signing, contracts, working on different at different levels, advising executives, like just things that come with time and practice.
Yeah, that's a very good point, and I just want to add one thing to that. I think going into an agency is it's not just about having the learning curve and getting the experience. I do agree that's a very important point, and thank you for pointing that out. But I also think in agencies there are people who have your back. There are people who have worked in that industry for many, many years and really know what to do in specific situations. I don't think in most of even the top companies, you would have that kind of an extensive team, like who would hire like 20 people to do PR for just a single company, unless unless they are a billion-dollar company. But mostly, I think in agencies, I think it's great that people are there that have your back and that will really help you when things go south.
I would agree with that. I think it's nice to learn from others and bounce ideas off each other, just versus just kind of being in one role and on your own. Like, it's nice. You build a sense of community.
I think what we're also showing is that there is a path through the PR work to be an entrepreneur, to set up your own business. Ashley did it. I have done it. Maybe Wahid will do it. And I know that through journalism nowadays, that pathway is becoming easier because the personal brand is there, but it takes a long time. And I think in this business, you can acquire one or two clients, and from there you build out. There's a more obvious way to being your owner of a business in PR, if that's what excites you. And there are certainly challenges and a lot of fun elements to doing that I never really felt as a journalist I was going to be able to strike it out on my own.
Very good point. Could we maybe dive into that a little bit as well? So maybe you guys have some specific tips or resources, advice about building your brand as a PR person, especially starting out?
I think it kind of comes down to two things. I think it's one is like figure out what it is you want to be doing that will make you happy. Like there's a lot of aspects of PR that, I find enjoyable and some I don't. And so I think figuring out what that is, and then also what kind of gives you a little bit of an edge. So, I one of the things that I kind of focused on early in my PR career was technical writing. I have some experience with programming and programming languages, and I really wanted to like help companies like explain more technical research pieces. And talking to even some other people in the industry, I think sometimes like the technical writing skills are hard to come by. And I think this could be really relevant for a lot of protocol reporters here. It's something that I think clients really do want to have, even and not like the distill it down for like a mainstream audience. This is more like for a developer audience, say. So I think that could really come in handy. And also just figure out have these meetings with different PR people, find out what pricing is like so you can get comfortable offering your services and feeling like you're compensated well. I always I worked for next to nothing when I started out, and then eventually over time you'll kind of build up your experience, and your currency is really like what you get, like the wins that you get. So keeping track of all of your wins and your media results and the different campaigns you've worked on, and that eventually becomes like a word of mouth game too. Like people find out, if you're working for a big client and they really like your work, they'll talk to, the VCs will find out about you, and then they'll want to talk to you and see if they could set up some of their portcos with you. So eventually, pardon the marketing jargon, but it kind of has like a bit of a flywheel effect where your brand slowly starts to build over time, and you don't even have to do so in like an overt advertising type of way. Like it's just really, you'll start getting a lot of inbounds. There's so much work to go around in this industry too. Like a lot of PR people at different companies, we refer clients to each other all the time just because, I might not have the bandwidth to take somebody on. And so, and even sole contractors too, like if there's, if you're an independent writer or, you kind of have gone out on your own and I know that you're interested in certain types of clients, like I might refer them to you. So that's something, just kind of figure out what it is you want to be doing, itemize, like put everything down and figure out like, okay, well, what's a good, like, how can I charge or my services, and what gives you that edge, I would say.
Yeah, and when you're thinking of your brand, I think it's key to identify these two pieces of context for our industry. The PR agencies tend not to have a great reputation, or let's say it's mixed, because I think the agencies are doing a good job, but half the time they're being misjudged by the clients who, if they're not getting attention and not getting attraction, turn and point the finger at the agency as opposed to understanding what's really happening with their business. So you'll find, I mean, one type of client lead that I tend to avoid is the one that tells me, oh, I was working with this agency and they were no good, and then this agency and they were terrible. I was like, well, maybe it's you that's the problem, right? But that is a reality that PR agencies don't have the best relationship, best reputation necessarily. Therefore, how are you going to combat that? And I think take into account another part of our industry, which is quite specific, and that is it's a conference-led industry. If you're going to events and conferences, there's much more of a rapport with people that you're meeting, and they have a confidence level that's different. There's a trust. Because at the moment, people don't trust the marketing about PR agencies because they're hearing this bad reputation, but they're going to be thinking, yeah, but I met Wahid, I met Ashley, they were really interesting to talk to. They knew their stuff. They're clearly credible. And that's the best way of helping your brand.
Yeah, I guess I can just add one thing to that. Both of the insights were amazing. I think I can just add that as a former reporter, I think it's also necessary to be easy to reach out to. For example, when we, as reporters, I personally try to remove my email from as many databases and platforms as possible. For PR, now I'm exactly doing the opposite, trying to be easy to reach out to, trying to get myself out there and tell reporters, editors that, and even companies that I am here.
Yeah, that's a good mindset shift as well. Very important. So kind of like building on that, Phil had a question in the chat. Do you think that client expectation management is unusually high in crypto versus other industries, as in building on the specifics of crypto? And or if you guys have something else about the specifics of our industry that you'd like to share, that would also be great.
I'd like to answer this one by saying, yeah, I think there is a particular symptom of our industry that the expectations are high because from the startup's perspective, the stakes are incredibly high. I started in the ICO phase, and it was literally if you did a good job at getting attention on that particular startup, they could suddenly become multimillionaires overnight, right? And therefore, they put a lot of store in the work that you were doing. And it gets quite intense when it feels like they need to rely on you in order to have that success. It's not as bad, and there are more longer term there's more longer term thinking going on these days, but PR does make a huge difference. And therefore the people who are hiring you are expecting you to make a big difference. It puts an intensity around the expectations as opposed to more established firms that are thinking of the general aura that comes with a better reputation. And I think we have founders who it's often their first time with a company or the first time with a PR agency, and they don't necessarily understand even what to expect. I think Ashley spoke about mission creep, scope creep. That's because PR for many of the people we deal with means very different things and gets lumped in with marketing. So there's that lack of education is a problem at times, but the main one is that people really think they can get rich if we do a good job for them.
I think just to add to that, a lot of crypto's that industry that a lot of VCs will throw money at. So an idea that's not actually, implemented anywhere, companies that haven't approached mainnet, like they'll have this seed of an idea or they're building out a company, but they don't have any proven experience yet. There's nothing to prove. They don't have any users. There will be a lot of the expectations are high, I guess, in terms of, I'm bringing on an agency, but I want, 5 media hits in all of the top crypto publications each month. And, I always try to, I never, and I imagine the others on the call, you can't guarantee media coverage. Like if you want to pay for sponsored content, that's one thing. But, I think really managing those expectations with potential clients goes a long way, because I think that also feeds into why sometimes PR agencies get a bad reputation. Is it's just they're mismet, like the expectations of the client are not what's delivered upon, and that needs to be really like figured out in the contract phase. Like, this is what we can do, this is what we can't do, and we can't promise this. So I think definitely probably more like higher expectations, like in the crypto space. It just because there's a lot more money involved from my experience, and you're working with companies that aren't as mature or as experienced working with different layers of communication, PR agencies, that sort of thing that Saul was mentioning.
Yeah, I think this is a very good question. I think the basic problem here is that most of the companies and these clients just sometimes wouldn't understand how media works. They have higher expectations. They see like this company covered this specific angle and mine is kind of similar and I want you to 100% get me there. But sometimes they just don't understand. It might not be the right time for that. It might not be your company's data might not be the right for that. So I think it's good to have clients' expectations, everything listed, and everything should be addressed before even starting to work with them. Like they need to understand what you're going to deliver.
Can we also just maybe in the last few minutes talk about some common misconceptions, because you guys are touching on that a bit, misconceptions about PR, like what is PR in your view, especially speaking to people who yeah, are maybe looking to get into a PR role, whether agency or in-house, from media, but also people who are just on the media side. What is PR in a few words, or how you do it?
Yeah, I think the good thing here is that on the good side, it's rather fluid, how you might describe it. And that gives an opportunity because you can use your skills in different ways. If you want to do crisis communications, if you want to do thought leadership, where you're coming up with the narratives and writing stories, or you want to do the, pound the pavement type of pitching to get people into the media. That's actually helpful when you're moving across because you can find where your skills fit. Where the mismatched expectations come in are that PR, from all that we've been talking about, is an earned process. Because of the strength of your story, you're earning the attention of the journalist who then writes about it or includes your sort of subject matter expertise. And where the problem comes in is that there's a blurring of lines between paying for something, sponsored content, paid content, even owned content at times. It all gets blurred in with what is earned media. And when from our side we have clients who don't understand that distinction, that there can be problems. I think the issue is often that if you've been a journalist, you've obviously got relationships with people who are currently writing stories in different newsrooms. But one thing that the client has to be educated on is it's great, my former colleagues will pay attention to me because it's me, but they'll only write the story because it's a good story. That's the thing, that there are no favors. I mean, everyone on this call knows that, but the clients don't necessarily know that. So I think that the PR is basically earning the right for the company you're representing to have their stories told through the media.
Super, super well said. So well said that nobody has anything to add.
Yeah, I mean that was he summed it up really well. I think yeah, I can't really think of anything to add to that.
Yeah, the earned aspect, it's part of the education, I feel like, especially for clients. Yeah, Wahid, go ahead.
Yeah, I think everything's well covered. And From the media side, I think the biggest misconception about PR is just like getting pitches out there. Most reporters just think that you're just getting pitches out there, but actually it's much more than that. We have to somehow shape the narrative for companies, and we need to help them decide what they need to say and what they don't need to say.
That's a great point. I think, I remember working, this would have been a long time ago. I was a very technical founder, but also somebody who was going on Bloomberg, and this was back in 2021. And, I was really, this was still, everybody was still, I don't even, Bloomberg crypto was around, but, I tried to explain to the person, don't go on there and talk about consensus mechanisms and different things that will confuse the audience and the reporter. Like this is, you like Wahid said, you have to prepare key messaging and, sometimes executives will need media training because people have a hard time communicating in crypto. And that's something that comes naturally to journalists, you're natural born communicators. That skill is definitely something that can be taught and is often taught behind closed doors before, the interview even takes place. So it's more than just pitching, definitely.
Excellent. So we only have a couple minutes. There is a good question I want to end with from Aaron. Thanks, Aaron. About basically coming back to the sort of like brand building, but starting out. Some advice for people, again, on the practical side, who are looking to make the switch to PR, but maybe doing their own business. So bootstrapping, getting your first clients, you guys can see in the chat. Any quick thoughts and tips you could share on that?
I think initially it has to be on the relationships that you've already established. If you're here in crypto, people know you, go off leverage those relationships to get your foot in the door. Assume that you're not going to have 10 clients straight away, but on the first one or two, you're learning how to do it, and then you expand from there.
Yeah, I would say, it might require, you might not make a lot on your first couple clients. I know I didn't, but the work you do will be the most important thing, and that will carry you. So if you do a great job for those clients, chances are they will tell other companies they work with, or other companies that are doing a joint announcement with that company will see, oh wow, you really killed it on getting us media coverage or helping with our go-to-market strategy. So they might need help, and then eventually you start meeting all of these different people, and then you get to a point where you actually just, it's good to become selective about who you work with, because hopefully by that point you've figured out, okay, these are the types of clients I like, or this is the part of the industry I like and I really understand and I want to keep diving into, and I'm not so interested over here. So you can be more selective over time, because you're going to have people just coming to you, and then based on your wins, like your prices can and probably should go up at a certain point. Knowing your worth is something that's really big. I always really personally struggled with that. I would always, lowball myself a lot, and even now, I have friends tell me like, you should really charge more for that. But it's also a comfort thing for me. Like I feel like, I've come up with pricing that I'm comfortable with, and yeah. So I think it really, over time you will adapt. But I hope that answers your question, Aaron.
Yeah, definitely a great explanation. I don't think I can add anything to that because everything was just well said.
Well, amazing. It is now 1 minute after the hour, so we do need to wrap up. Thank you guys so much, panelists. You were amazing. This has been extremely fruitful, in my opinion, and the hour goes by so fast, which is always sad. And thank you all for joining live. Really appreciate you being here and sending questions. This is a recorded webinar, so it will be up on the ACJR YouTube. And again, just a reminder about the mentor program. that is something that we're gathering signups for right now, and that link is going to be in the ACJR chats. It'll be under the YouTube. We'll send the link around so you could actually pair up with someone and work more on specific skills. But thank you guys again. This has been really great.
Thanks for
Thanks for
organizing.
having me.
For everyone who turned
Thank
up.
you.
It's good
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah. It was
Bye,
awesome.
guys.
Thank you guys.
Yeah,
Take care.
it was fun. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, great to have you. Awesome. Talk soon. Bye.
Bye.